are strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but thee, dear Lord, none but thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is o'er, time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely o'er to thy kingdom shore, to thy shore. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be.
All right, so up to this point, there's some things that we kind of need to correlate together that we've already looked at from previous sections of the book. The enemies of Christ have basically all been introduced at this point. And so we've got the dragon, who is the serpent of old. Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9 is one place that he's talked about. We have that sea-born beast that's introduced to us in chapter 13, verse 1. And then the earthborn beast of 13:11. We've got discussion that sea-born beast is more than likely representative of human governments and those types of things. And the earthborn beast is a false prophet. Now we have the great harlot being introduced in verse 17, or chapter 17. If you look in verse 5, well, let's not do that yet. We'll look at this in a second. But in verse 5, this harlot is also identified as the city of Babylon, Babylon the Great. And so earlier places that Babylon has been talked about in the book can be associated with what's being talked about in chapter 17. And so just kind of keep that in mind. And so where we want to go with this morning is to try to identify exactly what we're supposed to understand from the imagery of this harlot and what the harlot represents. And so just the first 7 or so verses of the chapter. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, and I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot." Okay, so we're told at the outset that the scene is going to be a depiction of the judgment of the harlot. Okay, so we need to understand that that's what's going on in this chapter, and really chapter 18, and maybe even bleeding into chapter 19 just a hair. I'm not real sure where that line draws, but anyway, that's what this imagery is all about, is God's judgment against the great harlot. All right. Who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality. And so that's the connection with her sitting on many waters. We go back to that beast that arose from the waters, and we talked about the fact that that represented the deceived human governments. And this is the harlot who committed immoral acts with the kings of these various places. And so there's a tie-in to how the nations got the way that they got. And by the way, the false prophet later, by implication, it would be the same way. So that's what we're being told here, that she committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And that is kind of the way that sin works. People are drunk with sin. They are pulled into the influence of sin, and they have difficulty letting go. We talk about addictions to things like drugs and alcohol and that kind of stuff. And we talk about that. That's a good thing. There is a physiological addiction that arises to those kinds of things. Your body, in its processing of the chemicals that you're putting into it, respond in particular ways and create other chemicals that counteract those chemicals. And once you introduce these foreign chemicals at a high enough level for a long enough period of time, then your body has basically readjusted the way it's creating the chemicals that it makes to counteract those things, which is why, by the way, that your first high is always more intense than the ones later on, because your body's learning how to deal with it and metabolize it and get rid of it. All right, when you stop taking those things, your body's still producing all those other chemicals that it's making to deal with them. And you go through this process of what we call withdrawals. Now, the physiological aspect of it is relatively short-lived. Okay, that can actually happen. You can get clean in a relatively short period of time, a matter of hours or days, where the body's kind of readjust and says, okay, we're okay. The addiction that remains is in your head. The desire to feel those things again. The association of doing those things. It's really hard to change our habitual behavior. All sin is addicting like that. Okay? Drunk with the wine of her immorality. We get accustomed to being a certain way, to doing certain things, to going certain places, to engaging in certain behaviors with certain people. That becomes comfortable to us. That becomes our normal. Changing those things is very difficult. It's the same kind of concept. Okay, it's a psychological addiction. And by the way, when people do, for instance, have drug and alcohol problems and they get cleaned up, one of the things that they're actually counseled to do is to kind of cut ties with their old friends that they participated in these things with and go to different places and surround themselves in different, because if they find themselves back in the same old places with the same old people, they just naturally roll back into the same old behavior. That's the way sin works. So, that is kind of what that's talking about. People who fall underneath the influence of sin and who begin to be habitual practitioners of sin have, as Paul writes to Timothy, their conscience seared. And it becomes really, really hard to change people because of that scenario. And so that's what he's kind of painting this picture, okay? So we've got this harlot. This harlot has influenced these kings, and then all these people who have followed suit and participated in this immorality with them, they become drunk on it. And then it becomes really, really hard to extricate yourself from it. He carried me away, he says in verse 3, in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. This is not really new imagery. This is imagery that's been used already. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup of abominations and the unclean things of her immorality. Now I'm going to stop there. Don't read the next verse. Stop reading. Look at me. What's all this description of her scarlet and purple robes and the jewelry that adorns her? And what's all this about? Okay, she looks enticing. That's really the bigger thing. She is actually presented. That's what harlots do. Harlots dress to draw attention to themselves, to look enticing, to look like they have something to offer. And that's exactly what, this isn't a different woman. This is just a description of the woman. So look at the next verse. Upon her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So we're talking about the source of harlotry and immorality, personified as a person, dressed as a harlot, enticing folks with a cup full of abominations and unclean things, a cup full of her immorality. What does the cup represent? Well, it's a wine goblet. He just talked about those that get drunk on the immorality. Well, this is how the exchange takes place. She's got a cup of these things that she's offering. Come and drink with me. And they do. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints. What does the woman feed on? What's in the blood? Let me ask that question first. The Bible says that something particular lies in the blood. Life. Life is in the blood. So if I say drunk on the blood of the saints, then where does she get her strength from? From taking the life of the saints. All right? Drunk on the blood of the saints, with the blood of the witness of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly, and an angel said to me, why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman, of the beast that carries her, the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So we wanted to focus for just a little while on this woman. What I want to suggest to you is that there is nothing unique about the imagery of the harlot. There's nothing unique about the imagery of Babylon. Babylon has been used, going all the way back to the Old Testament, to represent what? Okay, earth kingdoms, in particular earth kingdoms that are evil. You also get introductions of other cities like Tyre and Sidon, Sodom and Gomorrah. All of these cities can be used because of, today we might use Las Vegas. What is Las Vegas's moniker? Yeah, Sin City. They're proud of that. Hey, this is Sin City. We might use a city like Las Vegas to stand for the same thing, representative of all that is evil in the world. And a government that approves of and even fosters it, rather than tries to control it. By the way, there's a million other cities that we could talk about in connection with that. It doesn't really matter what city it is, and it doesn't really matter if you're talking about Babylon of the Old Testament or you're talking about, by the way, by the time this was written, Babylon didn't even really exist. It was gone for all intents and purposes. So it's not past, present, or future. It's all of those things. It's any of these human organizations that proliferate and thrive on immorality. All right, so the harlot or as she's called here, the mother of harlots. And that's kind of interesting language as well, because the serpent of old is called what? The father of lies. And we know that that means that he is the ultimate, original source of lies and deception. So when it's calling this harlot the mother of all harlots, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the ultimate source of harlotry. Where's it come from? Well, it comes from this woman, who is very enticing, by the way. Let's read the description again. Clothed in purple and scarlet, she looks regal. Adorned with gold and precious stones, she looks wealthy. Is she a delight to the eyes? Is she being presented as desirable? Yeah. Having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations that we've already been told get people what? Drunk. Don't look upon wine when it's in the cup, when it sparkles. Alas, he says, it bites like a serpent. The appearance is different than the reality. So who is this intriguing, beautiful harlot, and have we been introduced to this harlot before? I'm going to turn you all the way back to the book of Proverbs. All the way back to the book of Proverbs chapter 7. There are other places that we could go. There are even other places within the book of Proverbs we could go. But this chapter is fantastic in giving us a picture of what he's talking about when he talks about this great harlot. And this, again, is not new symbolism. This is symbolism that God has used from the beginning to help us understand and be able to relate to things that otherwise are kind of hard to relate to. If he was just talking about sin and immorality in abstract terms, it would be really hard for us to relate to it. If he was saying to us academically, now sin is very enticing, and so be careful, it would still be hard for us to do what? Relate to what that meant. What do you mean it's enticing? How is sin enticing? I thought sin brings death. Why? How is it? Things that I know bring death aren't enticing to me. So in what way is sin enticing? How's it enticing to be a liar? How's it enticing to be a thief? How's it enticing to be a murderer? How's it enticing to cheat on your spouse? How's that enticing? If I just say, hey, these things are enticing, we can't really, but if I say, hey, these things are like this woman who's dressed in scarlet and in purple and covered in jewelry and gold and fine shiny stones, and she's got a cup of wine in her hand, and she's enticing and telling you to come in. See, that's a different picture that I can relate to and understand. I've found myself in situations where I've seen things that were enticing. So listen to what Proverbs 7 says. My son, keep my words and treasure up my commandments with you. Keep my commandments and live. And so at the beginning of this chapter of Proverbs 7, we're told that what this is really about is the commandments of God, the words of God, and eternal life. Okay, that's what he's talking about. Keep my teaching as the apple of your eye. What does that mean, as the apple of your eye? The thing that's most desirable to you. You want to know what should be desirable, what you should keep close enough that it reflects off of your eye. My teaching. That's what you should desire. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister. By the way, wisdom is personified in the beginning of this book as a woman who is crying out, "Oh, naive ones, how long will you remain naive?" So when he says, say to wisdom, you're my sister, he's talking about something he's already talked about, that wisdom is actually out there calling to us. But wisdom's never presented as quite the enticing character that the harlot is presented as. And that, in fact, is the way we find life, right? Sin is always more enticing than the right thing. In fact, very often the right thing is what? Hard. How many of us like to do the hard thing? When we're given a choice between doing something a hard way or doing it the easy way, which way do we choose? We choose the easy way. Well, I don't need to work that hard. Okay, so that's what he's talking about here. Okay, so here's this woman wisdom out here, but this is the hard way. But he says this is what needs to be the desire. You need to bind this close to your heart. This needs to be the apple of your eye. And he traces it all the way back to my commandments, my teachings. That's what I'm talking about. Call insight your intimate friend. Insight comes from what? From wisdom. Having the insight, the internal knowledge to be aware of something. He said, call insight your intimate friend to keep you from the forbidden woman. Now, again, let's go back to Matthew 4. How did Jesus avoid temptation? He was intimate friends with the commandments of God. Insight was his intimate friend, and he said, but it's written. You say I should do this, but it's written. He's familiar with what is right and what is good and what is proper and the commandments of the Father, and says, can't do that. Would it have been easy for him to eat after 40 days without eating? Yes. By the way, just not too long ago, last week, I saw an article. Some guy tried to recreate the 40-day fast of Jesus and died doing it. Don't try that. It would have been easy for him to eat at that point. It was hard for him to control his urge to eat and to fill the void in his stomach and to satisfy the desire of his body and say, but the Lord said, man shall not live by bread alone, but on every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. But that's what he did. Why? Because he was intimately familiar with the word and the commandments of God. He knew that it would have been wrong. And so he was able to avoid the temptation. To keep you from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. What do we always associate smooth words with? I'm sorry? Politicians and salesmen. You ever heard anybody say, oh, he's a silver-tongued devil? There's the other thing we associate it with. The devil. That's exactly what we're supposed to realize. We've got a harlot here who is full of smooth words. What is the idea of smooth words? That's an idiom. It's a phrase that doesn't mean what it, on its face, would mean, but it immediately draws your mind to something. Smooth way. It's not talking about the texture of words. It's not even talking about someone being eloquent. Listen, Apollos was eloquent, but he wasn't said to be full of smooth words. Instead, he was said to be mighty in the scriptures. He was an eloquent man who was mighty in the scriptures. Why not use smooth words with Apollos? What do we immediately think of when the words smooth words? Ooh, listen to that slick tongue. There's another phrase that we use. What do we mean by that? Go ahead. I think I heard it. Lies. That's exactly what we mean by that. So we're talking in this harlot with someone who is putting forth the lies that come from the father of lies. So you've got the father of lies, and then you can have this harlot with her smooth speech. That is the mother of harlotry. The window of my house I have looked out through my lattice. I have seen among the simple. I have perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense. Don't get caught up in the young part of this. The idea is we've got someone who's naive. Again, keep in mind, this book begins with, how long, O naive ones, will you remain naive? You have wisdom that is being provided to you by God. How long are you going to stay naive so that you can't discern between those things which are good and those things which are not? I perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense passing along the street near her corner. What made him lack sense was that he was going by her house. Because if you have any sense at all, you see the harlot for who she is. A silver-tongued devil. And what do you do with silver-tongued devils? You avoid them. But instead, he's going near her house. Taking the road to her house, verse 8, in the twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. There's even more foolishness. You go into these areas where sin and immorality proliferates. If you happen to go down there or need to go down there for some reason, you certainly don't go down there when? At night. Because guess what happens at night? All the bad stuff. Back in the 70s, a fellow named Edgar Winter put out an album called They Only Come Out at Night. Even the world understands. The downtown Lafayette's a very different place at 10 o'clock in the morning than it is at 2 o'clock in the morning. If you got to go by her house, you certainly don't do it at night. But here's this guy, not only down there, but it's at the time of night and darkness. And behold, the woman meets him, dressed as a prostitute, wily of heart. She's loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay home. Now in the street, now in the market, and at every corner she lies in wait. Listen, this isn't a particular location. This moves. She seizes him, she kisses him, and with bold face she says to him, I had to offer sacrifices, and today I've paid my vows, so now I've come out to meet you. To seek you eagerly, and I have found you. Oh, I want you. Now listen, that always works. The smooth-talking man or woman who is trying to conquer you will always feed you the lie, I want you. You're special. I came looking for you. I need you. You're the only person in the world. And what do we know about harlotry? You're the only person in the world so long as what? So long as I'm getting what I want from you. And then when we're done, the next guy is the only person in the world for me. And then after him, the next guy. And by the way, we can spin this around on its head and we can make this a man, and he's doing the same thing as he preys on young women. And he looks into their eyes and says, I love you, and you're the only person for me, and you're the only thing that matters to me until tomorrow morning. And then he's gone and never calls again. And the process repeats itself. That's what's being described here. But what are we talking about? That's the question we're asking. Who is this harlot? What is this harlot representing? That's the question we're trying to answer. I spread my couch with coverings, colored linens from Egyptian linen. I've perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and everything is beautiful. I've put the finest sheets on the bed, and I've perfumed them, and just come into my house. Come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. Come, let us take our fill of love till morning. Let us delight ourselves with love, for my husband is not at home. He's gone on a long journey. He took a bag of money with him, full moon. You're not going to get caught. Come into me. I came looking for you. I want you. I've prepared for you. I've got the finest in store for you. Come into my luxury and enjoy yourself with me, and you're not going to get caught. You're going to get away with it. With much seductive speech, she persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. All at once he follows her, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or a stag is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver. As a bird rushes into a snare. There's 3 different illustrations of being caught. He does not know that it will cost him his life. And now, O sons, listen to me. Be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths, for many a victim has she laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng. Listen, she doesn't just prey on the weak. Her prey include the mighty as well. Her house is the way to Sheol. What is Sheol? The grave. Going down to the chambers of death. What leads to death? Sin. What leads to sin? Okay, desire. What causes desire? Where does it all start? Where did Adam and Eve's sin start? And what did he do? He lied. He told them things that weren't true. Now we get to who the harlot is. Remember, this chapter started with, hey, keep my words, keep my commandments, keep my teachings, keep my wisdom as your desire and close to you, because the lies of the harlot are that you're the only thing that matters. This is the only thing that's important. You're not going to get caught. It's going to be okay. You're going to be like God. It's going to make you better. You need the experience. There actually were people in this world who used to believe that in order for a person to really be wise, they needed to go out into the world and try everything that the world had to offer. And sow their wild oats. And what God is saying in Proverbs 7 is, that's a lie. And what it's going to do is ensnare you and lead you to death. You're going to be just like an ox that's going into the slaughterhouse. You're going to be just like the deer that is caught until the arrow pierces his liver. What happens when the arrow pierces his liver? He dies. You're going to get caught up in this and you're going to die. Do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is in the midst of the garden. In the day you shall eat thereof, you shall surely die. You shall not surely die. It's going to make you wise. It's going to make you better. It's going to make you live to your full potential. You're going to get snared in it until you're like the bird and you die. It's the lie that leads to sin. And it's the sin that leads to death. This harlot that's going to be judged is all of the body of false teaching and immorality and ungodliness, the world and its works. Jesus taught what was going to happen to the world and all of its works. They're going to be cast in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. That's what's going to happen. But when they present themselves to you, they present themselves to you as a woman clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, and having a gold cup of abomination. Oh, come on. It's going to be okay. You're going to enjoy this. This is going to be good for you. This is going to help you. This isn't going to hurt you. God's just trying to keep you from having fun. There's a great story about a gospel preacher years ago. Did a lot of work, baptized a lot of people. He went into this town and he was holding a protracted meeting in a tent. That's what he liked to do. Even into the 70s, he liked to put up a tent and do his meetings in tents instead of buildings. He didn't refuse to preach in buildings, but he just preferred that. He did a lot of that. Baptized thousands and actually tens of thousands of people, this individual did. But he told a story about being in one town and converting someone and taking this fellow around town with him the day after he had been baptized at a meeting the night before. And as he was driving around and interacting with people, when he's in the car with him, he's talking to him and he's teaching him. And he's, well, Christians don't do this and we don't do it. And finally, at one point of the conversation, the fellow apparently stopped him and said, we can't do anything fun. That's the lie of the world. This is fun. This is God's trying to keep you from joy. That's the lie. Because what everybody finds out is after 30 seconds, the joy is gone. And now, the next 3 days is spent trying to do what? Recreate the joy. Find the next. Now, we can talk about this in any terms you want to. Find the next fix. Find the next girl. Find the next opportunity. Find the next thing. Find the thing I hadn't tried yet. Find the next thing that's going to bring this exhilaration to me because, as soon as it was over, that was gone. And what we really find out is all of those promises are what? They're empty. And when we get snared in them, what we find out is that they bring death. Now, that's what James was talking about when he said that we're enticed by our own desires, and that gives rise to lust, and that lust conceives and gives birth to sin, and then sin brings forth death. That doesn't come from God. Don't say when you're tempted that you're being tempted by God, he says. No. It's the harlot. And she's sitting on the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns and the crowns on his head that he talked about it in chapter 4, 6, a couple of chapters ago. And that beast is working for who? The serpent of old. The same one that lied to Adam and Eve in the garden and messed everything up. Romans chapter 5 makes that pretty clear, right? That Adam sinned and brought these things into the world, and then it passed to all men because all sin. And so we need to understand that that's what's going on here, and that's who we're talking about in this chapter. We're talking about this personification of the lie of the devil that leads people into immorality and ungodliness and death. And God is saying, don't worry, I'm going to judge it. And it's going to be cast into the lake of fire. The beast that you saw was and is not, it is about to come up out of the abyss and to go to destruction. It's only a matter of time. The allies of the devil lose. It's only a matter of time. When's it going to happen? when God's ready. Doesn't matter when it happens. It can be 1,000,000 years from now. That's okay. I still need to do the same thing. What's that? Wise up and not be enticed, because she leads to death and destruction and judgment. And I can be certain that judgment will come. And Peter talks about that. The fact that people say, well, where's this promise of his judgment? People go, well, you know what? They've been doing this for 100 years and nothing's happened to them yet. And so this whole thing about this being bad for you and this leading to death, that's nonsense. And Peter says this one fact escapes their notice: that God is not governed by time. That's that famous passage where he says that a year is like, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day. That's all that means. He's not governed by time. He's not sitting there going, okay, it's been long enough, now let's do this. That's not how this works. And he's not slow as some count slowness. He's exercising patience towards you that you might come to repentance, because he doesn't want to judge you and cast you into the second death with the harlot and the beast and the devil. So Revelation is saying, look, this is what's going to happen. Just trust me. Wait. And be on guard. And don't allow this temptress to suck you in. Because if she does, she entraps you and you get caught up in her judgment. Here is the mind, verse 9 of chapter 17. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1, the other has not yet come. And all this is doing, again, this hasn't stopped being symbolism. It's being explained. 7 is the completion. He says we're a good way through this. 5 of these things have already come. 1 is, and 1's yet to be. Past, present, and future. I don't know when the time is. That's not the point. He's not letting us know what the time is. He's just telling us what? That we're in the middle of it. And we're closer to the end than the beginning. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. They all go to destruction. Everybody tied up with it goes to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for an hour. There's a brief period of time when it looks like evil forces are winning. These have one purpose. They give their power and authority to the beast. All of them are feeding the beast. These will wage war against the Lamb. These are the people who fight Christ. And the Lamb will overcome them, because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are the called and the chosen, the faithful. Which side do you want to be on? That's the question. We have to stop. I'm out of time. But this is really good stuff. And it is...
I have heard of a land on a faraway strand. In the Bible the story is told, where cares never come, never darkness nor gloom, and nothing shall ever grow. In that beautiful storms with their blast ever frown. The street, I am told, is paved with pure gold, and the sun it shall never go down. There are evergreen trees that been blowing in the breeze, and their fruitage is brighter than gold. There the throne of God stands in the fairest of lands, and nothing shall ever grow old. In that beautiful land, on the faraway strand, no storms with their blast ever frown.